What if I told you that right now, in 2025, entire families, people with full-time jobs, are sleeping in their cars because they have nowhere else to go? This isn't some dystopian movie. It's real life. Parking lots have turned into neighborhoods. Thousands of Americans wake up every morning in the driver's seat of their own personal prison, wondering how they got here. And the numbers? They're terrifying. Over 600,000 Americans are homeless, and that number is rising every single day. But here's what no one is talking about. Many of these people aren't addicts, criminals, or jobless. They're regular, hardworking people. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, Uber drivers. People who did everything right and still lost everything. So, what's really happening? Is it greedy landlords? Corporate greed? A failing economy? Or is it something even bigger? Something no one wants to admit? In this video, we're breaking down the 10 real reasons why Americans are being forced out of their homes and into their cars. Some of these reasons will shock you, others will anger you, but one thing is for sure, by the end of this video, you'll never see this crisis the same way again. And trust me, you need to watch till the end, because the number one reason behind this disaster is something no one is talking about. Let's get into it. Number 10. Skyrocketing rent and home prices. In 2025, rent prices in America have hit record-breaking highs, and for millions of people, keeping a roof over their heads is no longer an option. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in major cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Austin now exceeds $2,500 a month, a price that most middle-class workers simply can't afford. Even smaller towns that used to be considered affordable have seen rent hikes of 30%, 40%, or even 50% in just a few years. But here's the real kicker. While rent has skyrocketed, wages have barely moved. People are paying more for housing than ever before, yet their salaries haven't kept up. Many are forced to choose between paying rent or buying groceries, and for those who can't keep up, eviction becomes inevitable. Buying a home isn't an option either. The average home price in the U.S. has shot past $400,000, and with interest rates at an all-time high, even people with decent jobs can't qualify for a mortgage. Home ownership, once the foundation of the American dream, is now out of reach for millions. So where do these people go? Many move into their cars thinking it's temporary, but with no affordable housing in sight, weeks turn into months, and for some, it becomes their new way of life. And if you think this is bad, wait until you hear about the next reason people are ending up on the streets. Because even those with savings aren't safe anymore. Number 9. Inflation eating away savings. Imagine working hard for years, saving every penny, and thinking you're financially secure, only to watch your savings disappear faster than ever. That's exactly what's happening in 2025. Inflation has made everything more expensive. Groceries, gas, utilities, healthcare. The cost of basic necessities has risen so much that even people who once had a financial cushion are now struggling to survive. A gallon of milk that used to cost $3 is now nearly $6. A full tank of gas? Easily over $100 in some states. And let's not even talk about electricity and heating bills. Those have doubled in some areas. Here's where it gets worse. Even though wages have gone up slightly, the increase hasn't kept up with inflation. That means every dollar earned buys less than it did last year, making it harder and harder for people to stay afloat. Many have burned through their entire life savings just trying to keep up with the rising costs. And when the money runs out, they lose their homes. More and more middle-class families, retirees, and even young professionals have been forced to move into their cars. Not because they don't work hard, but because the economy is working against them. And if you think landlords and rising prices are bad, wait until you hear about the next problem. Evictions are happening at an alarming rate, and no one is safe. Number 8. Evictions at an all-time high. Imagine getting a notice on your door telling you that you have 30 days to leave. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your landlord is raising the rent beyond what you can afford. For millions of Americans in 2025, this nightmare is real. Evictions have surged to historic levels, with landlords kicking out tenants at record speed. Some are raising rent by hundreds of dollars overnight, knowing that if their current tenants can't pay, someone else will. Others are using legal loopholes to force people out, just so they can bring in new tenants willing to pay more. And for those who fall behind on rent, the eviction process moves fast. In many cities, missing just one payment is enough to get people thrown out, with nowhere to go. Shelters are already full, and government assistance programs are stretched too thin to help everyone. Even tenants who have done everything right, paid rent on time, followed all the rules, are getting notices that their homes are being sold or converted into luxury apartments. With nowhere else to turn, many have no choice but to move into their cars, hoping it's only temporary. But here's the real problem. Once you're evicted, getting another place is almost impossible. Landlords often won't rent to people with an eviction on their record, trapping them in a cycle of homelessness. And if evictions aren't bad enough, the next issue is even worse. Stagnant wages that make escaping homelessness nearly impossible. Number 7. Stagnant wages versus cost of living. Working full-time used to mean financial security, but in 2025 it barely covers the basics. The cost of living has skyrocketed, yet wages haven't kept up, leaving millions struggling to survive, even those with stable jobs. The federal minimum wage is still stuck at $7.25 an hour in some states, while rent, food, and gas prices have doubled or even tripled. Even in states where the minimum wage is higher, it's still not enough to afford a basic apartment. People are working harder than ever, taking on multiple jobs, pulling overtime, driving for rideshare companies, yet still falling behind. The gap between income and expenses is so wide that saving money has become impossible. For many, a single unexpected expense like a medical bill or a car repair is enough to push them into homelessness. And here's the scary part. Even professionals aren't safe anymore. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, and even tech employees are struggling. Some are sleeping in their cars because their salaries no longer cover rent. This isn't just about bad financial decisions, and it's about a system that no longer works for the average person. And when people can't earn enough to afford a home, they turn to gig work, hoping for better luck. But as you'll see in the next section, gig jobs are making things even worse. Number 6. Increase in gig and contract work. For years, gig work was sold as the ultimate freedom. Flexible hours, be your own boss, work whenever you want. But in 2025, the gig economy has become a trap, forcing millions into unstable, low-paying jobs with no security. More and more companies are cutting full-time positions and replacing them with contract and gig workers. Why? Because it saves them money. Gig workers don't get health insurance, paid time off, or job protection. If work slows down, they're simply cut off, with no unemployment benefits to fall back on. Take rideshare drivers, food delivery workers, and freelancers. Many work 12 to 16-hour days, yet barely make enough to survive. Platforms like Uber, DoorDash, and Instacart keep slashing pay rates, forcing workers to do more for less. And it's not just blue-collar workers suffering. Even in tech, media, and healthcare, companies are replacing employees with temporary contractors, leaving workers without stability. Without a steady paycheck, benefits, or job security, saving money is impossible. Renting a home becomes a gamble because landlords prefer tenants with stable incomes. And when gig workers hit hard times, there's no safety net to catch them. For many, losing a gig means losing everything, and when that happens, they end up living in their cars. And if you think renting is hard, wait until you hear about the next reason people are going homeless. Even homeowners are being forced onto the streets. Number 5. Rise in foreclosures. Owning a home used to be the ultimate sign of stability, something to pass down to future generations. But in 2025, homeownership is turning into a financial nightmare for millions of Americans. With interest rates at record highs, mortgage payments have skyrocketed. Many homeowners who bought houses when rates were low are now seeing their monthly payments double or even triple due to adjustable rate mortgages. Those who could barely afford their homes before are now completely drowning in debt. And it's not just about interest rates. The cost of home maintenance, property taxes, and insurance has also shot up, making it even harder for homeowners to stay afloat. For those living paycheck to paycheck, a single missed payment can trigger the foreclosure process, forcing them out of their homes and onto the streets. Banks aren't helping either. Instead of working with struggling homeowners, lenders are quick to repossess homes and sell them to investors, who turn them into high-priced rentals or Airbnbs. Meanwhile, former homeowners are left with nowhere to go. Many of these once stable families are now living in RV parks, campgrounds, or their own cars, hoping for a miracle. But for those struggling with mental health issues, the situation is even worse. Because next, we're talking about something no one likes to discuss: the mental health crisis that's pushing even more people into homelessness. Number 4. Mental health crisis and lack of support. Homelessness isn't just about money, it's also about mental health. And in 2025, the crisis has reached a breaking point. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other mental health issues are more common than ever, yet access to care is worse than ever. Therapy and medication are too expensive, and wait lists for public mental health services are months, sometimes years long. For many, mental health struggles make it hard to hold a job, pay bills on time, or even function day to day. And when there's no safety net, things spiral fast. People lose jobs, miss rent payments, get evicted, and suddenly they're sleeping in their car. Veterans, abuse survivors, and people with untreated conditions like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia are especially vulnerable. But instead of getting help, many end up on the streets or in jail since the US treats homelessness like a crime rather than a crisis. And here's the scary part. Even people with no history of mental illness are breaking under the stress of losing their homes, struggling to survive, and feeling hopeless about the future. This crisis is destroying lives, but it's also pushing more and more people into a system that doesn't care. And when they finally seek help, they realize another harsh reality: medical debt is making homelessness even worse. Number 3. Medical debt and unaffordable healthcare. In 2025, getting sick isn't just a health risk, it's a financial disaster. Medical bills have become one of the leading causes of homelessness, forcing people out of their homes and into their cars. Even with insurance, a single hospital visit can cost thousands of dollars. An unexpected surgery? Tens of thousands. And if you don't have insurance, you're drowning in debt before you even leave the hospital. Prescription drug prices have skyrocketed, specialist visits are unaffordable, and many people are forced to skip doctor appointments just to pay rent. But here's the catch. Ignoring health issues only makes them worse, leading to bigger, more expensive problems down the line. And when medical debt piles up, debt collectors come knocking. Wages get garnished, credit scores crash, and suddenly landlords won't rent to you because you're considered a financial risk. Some people have even had their cars repossessed, leaving them not just homeless, but with no transportation to get back on their feet. For the sick, disabled, and elderly, the situation is even worse. Many are being pushed out of homes they've lived in for decades, with no place to go and no resources to help them. And while medical debt is ruining lives, another massive problem is keeping people trapped in their cars: the complete failure of affordable housing programs. Number 2. Lack of affordable housing solutions. For years, politicians have promised to fix the housing crisis, but in 2025, things have only gotten worse. Affordable housing programs are overwhelmed, underfunded, and nearly impossible to access, leaving millions with nowhere to go. Section 8, one of the largest government housing assistance programs, has waiting lists that stretch for years. And in some cities, applications aren't even being accepted anymore. For those lucky enough to get approved, finding a landlord who actually accepts housing vouchers is another battle. Many landlords would rather jack up rent prices for higher-paying tenants than accept government assistance. Low-income housing developments? They're barely being built. Meanwhile, big investors and corporations are buying up properties, turning homes into luxury apartments or overpriced Airbnbs that working-class families can't afford. Homeless shelters are already beyond capacity, forcing families to sleep in their cars, parks, or tent cities. And when people reach out for help, they're told to wait or keep looking, as if affordable options actually exist. With no real solutions, car living has become the new normal for thousands of Americans. And the scariest part? This crisis is no longer just affecting the poor, it's hitting the middle class too. And if you think things couldn't get worse, wait until you hear the number one reason why so many Americans are losing everything in 2025. Number 1. Job loss and economic downturn. Here's the harsh truth. Even if you do everything right, get a good job, pay your bills, and save money, you can still end up homeless. And in 2025, it's happening more than ever. Mass layoffs have hit every industry. Tech, retail, healthcare, manufacturing. Major companies are cutting costs, shutting down locations, and even replacing workers with AI and automation. For millions of people, their steady paycheck disappeared overnight, leaving them scrambling to find another job in an economy that isn't hiring. Unemployment benefits? They barely last a few months, and they're not enough to cover rent, bills, and food. Some people burn through their savings in weeks just trying to survive. Others never had savings to begin with. And when there's no income, no safety net, and no options, what happens next? Eviction, foreclosure, homelessness. Many of the people now living in their cars never thought it would happen to them. They had good jobs, families, and stable lives until the economy turned against them. This isn't just a housing crisis, it's an economic disaster. And if nothing changes, this problem will only get worse. So, what can be done? How do we fix this? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this video opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into today's biggest issues. This isn't just a crisis, it's a national tragedy. Right now, there are families tucking their children into the back seat of a car instead of a bed. Hardworking people who spent years building a life are now sleeping in parking lots, wondering where they went wrong. But the truth is, they didn't fail. The system failed them. The cost of living is out of control. Wages aren't enough. The safety nets that are supposed to help, they're broken. And if things don't change, this could happen to anyone. Making videos like this isn't easy. It takes hours of research, writing, and editing to shine a light on the stories that most people ignore. But I do it because these issues matter, because people need to know the truth. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, if you think more people should see what's really happening in America, then please subscribe to this channel. It's free for you, but it means everything to me. It helps this content reach more people, spread awareness, and maybe, just maybe, push for change. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.